When we would go carriage driving, well, first of all, he'd take me on a different route every day, and I do not know how he managed to do that.
At exactly 2:17 p.m. on February 15, 2026, the mahogany-paneled chambers of Farrer and Co. fell into absolute silence. Senior solicitor Marcus Wellington broke the crimson wax seal on a cream envelope that had waited 18 months to be opened. His hands trembled as he unfolded the document inside. "The Balmoral Private Trust," he announced to the room of expectant faces, "goes to Lady Louise Windsor exclusively." The phone in Camilla's Clarence House drawing room began ringing before Wellington had even finished speaking. On the other end, Tom Parker Bowles gripped his mobile so tightly his knuckles turned white. His sister Laura sat frozen in the leather chair across from him, watching 27 years of careful positioning crumble in a single sentence. "That's impossible," Tom whispered into the phone. "We were family. We were promised consideration." But the solicitor's voice cut through every expectation they had built. The estate, valued at £127 million, transfers in its entirety to Lady Louise. This includes the 15,000 acres of Highland property, the private residence, and all personal effects contained within. Hi viewers, what would you do if you discovered your family had been secretly planning your future without telling you? Camilla's hands shook as she set down her teacup. The delicate china rattled against the saucer like her carefully constructed world rattling against reality. For months, her children had whispered about inheritance equality. They had hired lawyers. They had crafted arguments about modern royal family inclusion. They had built their entire strategy on one fundamental assumption. They assumed Louise would never fight back. The 20-year-old granddaughter of Queen Elizabeth II had sat through every family dinner in perfect silence. She had nodded politely at every suggestion about sharing royal responsibilities. She had smiled when Tom's wife Jennifer joked about finally having a Scottish getaway. Louise had been the picture of royal composure while they divided up her inheritance right in front of her. Wellington's voice continued reading from documents they had never seen. Furthermore, Lady Louise Windsor has been granted exclusive executor authority over the Queen's personal jewelry collection, with specific instructions that no items be redistributed outside the direct bloodline. Laura Parker Bowles felt her chest tighten. The sapphire brooch she had admired at Christmas. The diamond earrings she had mentioned to her mother. The pearl necklace Jennifer had photographed for her Instagram wishlist. All of it belonged to a girl they had consistently underestimated. But what Tom and Laura didn't know was that Lady Louise had been awake during every whispered conversation. She had documented every assumption. She had quietly consulted with the same legal team that had served the crown for generations. And she had spent 18 months building an unbreakable case for why blood trumps marriage when it comes to royal legacy. The real shock wasn't that Louise had inherited everything. The real shock was what she had been planning to do about the family that tried to take it from her. Marcus Wellington's phone buzzed with an encrypted message at 3:41 p.m. The text contained only an address and a time. By 4:15 p.m., he was standing in the private lift of St. James's Palace, ascending to floors most of London never knew existed. The doors opened to reveal Lady Louise Windsor waiting in a conference room that looked more like a war room. Charts covered the walls. Legal documents formed neat stacks across a table that could seat 20. At the head of the table sat a leather portfolio that Wellington recognized immediately. "Mr. Wellington," Louise said without looking up from the document she was reviewing. "Thank you for handling the reading exactly as we discussed." Wellington had been practicing law for 37 years. He had handled divorces for billionaires and custody battles for celebrities. But he had never seen anyone prepare for family warfare the way Louise Windsor had prepared for this moment. She opened the leather portfolio and withdrew a folder marked with the Crown's private seal. This is Clause 47 of the Succession Stabilization Protocol. It was written in 1847 and has been invoked only twice in royal history. Once during the abdication crisis, and now. The document she placed before him was not the inheritance letter that had been read an hour earlier. This was something far more comprehensive, something that would reshape how royal inheritance worked for the next century. The Queen didn't just leave me Balmoral, Louise continued, her voice carrying an authority Wellington had never heard from someone barely out of their teens. She left me the power to redefine what royal family actually means. Wellington scanned the legal language that would have taken most lawyers weeks to understand. Louise had apparently mastered it in 18 months. Every clause had been studied. Every precedent had been researched. Every loophole had been closed before Camilla's family had even realized they were in a legal maze. The Succession Stabilization Protocol did more than transfer property. It established merit-based inheritance as the new standard for private royal assets. It created legal barriers against what the document termed inheritance presumption by marriage affiliation. Most devastatingly, it gave Louise the authority to determine which family members qualified for future considerations. This isn't just about money, Louise said, finally looking directly at Wellington. This is about preventing the royal family from becoming a participation trophy. But the most shocking revelation wasn't in the legal documents spread across the table. It was in the surveillance reports that Louise had been compiling for 18 months. Every family gathering had been documented. Every private conversation had been recorded with perfect legal authorization. Every assumption about her naivety had been carefully catalogued as evidence. Wellington realized that Louise hadn't just inherited Queen Elizabeth's estate. She had inherited Queen Elizabeth's strategic mind. And unlike Tom and Laura Parker Bowles, who had spent 18 months planning how to spend money that wasn't theirs, Louise had spent 18 months planning how to ensure they never could. The question that would keep Wellington awake that night was simple. If Louise had been this methodical about protecting her inheritance, what else had she been planning? Tom Parker Bowles arrived at Windsor Castle unannounced at 6:47 p.m., his Range Rover tires crunching against gravel that had witnessed 2 centuries of royal arrivals. None of them had been quite like this one. Castle staff members, speaking on condition of anonymity, would later describe the sound of Tom's footsteps echoing through the corridor as desperate. His usually polished appearance had cracked. His tie hung loose. His shirt showed sweat stains despite February's cold. He found Louise in the Queen's former private sitting room, exactly where he expected her to be. What he didn't expect was her composure. She sat reading correspondence as if nothing had changed. As if she hadn't just detonated the most expensive family conflict in modern royal history. "Louise," Tom said, his voice carrying the authority he had spent decades building as Camilla's eldest son. "We need to talk." Louise looked up from her letter with the same expression she had worn at every family dinner where they discussed her future without consulting her. Polite interest, patient attention, the kind of royal training that had been mistaken for weakness by people who had never actually understood what they were looking at. "Of course," she replied, gesturing to the chair across from her. "I've been expecting this conversation." For 47 minutes, Tom deployed every argument his legal team had prepared. He spoke about family unity. He referenced modern inheritance equality. He mentioned his children's university costs and Laura's mortgage payments. He reminded Louise that Camilla had been like a grandmother to her for over 20 years. Louise listened to every word without interruption. She nodded at appropriate moments. She maintained eye contact that never wavered. When Tom finished his carefully rehearsed presentation, the room fell into silence that stretched longer than either of them had planned. "Tom," Louise finally said, her voice carrying none of the deference he had grown accustomed to hearing from her. "Do you remember Christmas dinner 3 years ago?" The question caught him completely off guard. "What does that have to do with anything? You were discussing vacation homes with Laura. You said the royal family needed to modernize their asset distribution. You specifically mentioned that Balmoral was too much house for one person, and that it should serve the whole family." Louise paused, allowing Tom to remember the conversation he thought she hadn't been paying attention to. "I was 16 years old, and you were already dividing up my inheritance." Tom felt something cold settle in his stomach. Louise wasn't just recounting a memory. She was building a case. "That conversation was recorded," Louise continued, "along with 47 similar discussions over the past 4 years. Every assumption, every calculation, every plan you made for property that was never yours to plan for." The desperation in Tom's eyes shifted to something approaching panic. If Louise had been documenting their conversations for years, what else did she have? What other evidence had she been quietly collecting while they treated her like a polite spectator to her own inheritance? Louise stood up from her chair with the same fluid grace she had learned from watching Queen Elizabeth navigate decades of family crises. When she spoke again, her words carried the finality of a royal decree. "Blood doesn't choose favorites, Tom, but legacy does." The question that would haunt Tom during his silent drive back to London was whether Louise's response to their years of presumption would end with the inheritance, or if this was only the beginning of consequences they hadn't imagined possible. The Windsor Heritage Preservation File had been locked in a vault beneath St. James's Palace for 18 months. Project Continuity, as Queen Elizabeth II had privately named it, contained observations that would have ended political careers and rewritten royal succession protocols if they had ever been made public. A former private secretary, speaking on condition of anonymity, revealed that the Queen had begun documenting family dynamics with forensic precision after witnessing Tom Parker Bowles measure the dimensions of Balmoral's main drawing room during a Christmas visit. The incident had lasted less than 5 minutes, but it had triggered an investigation that would reshape royal inheritance forever. "Her Majesty saw everything," the source explained during a carefully arranged meeting in a Mayfair coffee shop that specialized in privacy. She noticed Tom's wife photographing the artwork. She watched Laura asking detailed questions about property maintenance costs. She documented every conversation where they discussed family equity, as if royal inheritance was a business merger. The Queen's handwritten notes, preserved in her distinctive blue ink, painted a picture of calculated opportunism that had been operating under cover of family affection. Entry after entry detailed moments when Camilla's children treated royal gatherings as real estate tours rather than family visits. But the most damaging evidence wasn't about what Tom and Laura had done. It was about what they had assumed about Louise. Queen Elizabeth had spent equal time documenting her granddaughter's responses to family pressures. Every moment when Louise had been excluded from inheritance discussions. Every instance when decisions about her future had been made without consulting her. Every assumption that her silence meant consent rather than strategy. The Queen had recognized something in Louise that reminded her of her younger self. The ability to observe without reacting. The discipline to document without revealing. The patience to wait until the perfect moment to act. These were not traits that could be taught in constitutional law classes or royal protocol seminars. These were survival skills that had kept the monarchy stable for centuries. Project Continuity contained detailed psychological profiles of every royal family member. Tom Parker Bowles was classified as opportunistic but transparent. Laura was noted as calculating but impatient. Camilla herself was described as protective of her children to the detriment of institutional stability. But Louise's profile filled 12 pages of careful analysis. The Queen had identified her granddaughter as possessing what the document termed constitutional temperament, the rare combination of personal discipline and institutional loyalty that had defined successful monarchs throughout history. The most revealing entry in the Queen's private notes was dated 6 months before her death. Louise has never asked for anything. She has never complained about family presumptions. She has never sought attention or sympathy. This is not weakness. This is preparation. Queen Elizabeth had spent her final year engineering a scenario that would test every member of the royal family. She had created conditions where character would be revealed through crisis, where true royal material would separate itself from royal circumstance. The inheritance dispute wasn't an accident. It was an examination that had been designed by a monarch who understood that the crown's survival depended on choosing the right people to carry it forward. What Tom and Laura still didn't understand was that they hadn't just lost an inheritance battle. They had failed a test that their stepmother's mother-in-law had been grading for years. Marcus Wellington's secure phone rang at 11:43 p.m. with the call he had been dreading. Tom Parker Bowles had hired Pemberton and Associates, the legal firm that specialized in challenging royal decisions that seemed unchallengeable. By morning, the strategy had leaked to 3 different media outlets. The headlines read like declarations of war. Parker Bowles family demands royal inheritance review. Legal challenge threatens Louise's Balmoral legacy. Modern family values clash with ancient royal rules. Jonathan Pemberton, Tom's lead attorney, had built his career on cases that others considered impossible. He had successfully challenged government land seizures and corporate inheritance disputes. He approached royal law with the confidence of someone who had never lost to institutions that considered themselves beyond question. The legal challenge centered on heritage law loopholes that Pemberton claimed had been ignored during the inheritance process. His team argued that Camilla's 20-year marriage to King Charles created inheritance equity that superseded traditional bloodline priorities. They demanded a full review of Queen Elizabeth's decision-making capacity during her final year. The strategy was brilliant in its simplicity. Rather than attacking Louise directly, they challenged the legal framework that had enabled her inheritance. They positioned themselves as victims of an outdated system rather than beneficiaries of family opportunism. But Pemberton had made the same mistake that Tom and Laura had made for years. He had underestimated Louise's preparation. Within 24 hours, Pemberton's legal team received a delivery that changed everything. 47 boxes of documentation arrived at their offices via royal courier. Each box contained evidence that Louise had been collecting for years: recorded conversations, financial analyses, timeline documentation of every inheritance assumption made by Camilla's family. The most devastating evidence was a series of emails between Tom and Laura discussing strategic positioning for royal inheritance opportunities. The messages revealed a level of calculation that made their public statements about family love look like performance art. Laura's email from December 2024 was particularly damaging. "We need to make sure Louise understands that being family means sharing resources. The girl has no concept of what she'll inherit. We can guide her toward better decisions." Tom's response showed equal manipulation. "Mother has the emotional connection to Charles. Louise has the blood connection to Elizabeth. We need to bridge that gap before the old woman makes any permanent decisions." But the email that destroyed Pemberton's legal strategy came from Jennifer Parker Bowles, Tom's wife. "If we play this right, we'll have Scottish estate access and London property shares within 5 years. Louise is too young to resist family pressure." Louise's legal team, led by chambers that had served the crown since the 18th century, responded to Pemberton's challenge with surgical precision. They released evidence in carefully timed intervals. Each revelation built upon the previous one. Each document made the inheritance dispute look less like legal oversight and more like attempted theft. The media narrative shifted within a week. Stories about family equity became stories about family exploitation. Legal challenges became desperate power grabs. Tom and Laura transformed from sympathetic stepfamily members to cautionary tales about what happened when ambition exceeded boundaries. Pemberton's resignation letter arrived on a Friday afternoon. His carefully constructed legal challenge had collapsed under the weight of evidence he never knew existed. Tom and Laura were left without representation and without the illusion that their years of inheritance planning had been subtle. But the most shocking revelation was still coming. Louise hadn't just documented their conversations and strategies. She had been working with Queen Elizabeth to create legal precedents that would prevent future inheritance manipulation attempts. The question that kept royal observers awake was whether this had been about protecting one inheritance or redesigning royal family dynamics for the next century. Pemberton's resignation hits the marble floor of the Crown Estate offices at 4:52 p.m. on a Friday, and before the ink dries, Camilla's private advisor Zola Abra is already on a scrambled call, rebuilding a strategy from nothing. 3 advisors are gone. The media narrative has flipped. And Tom Parker Bowles is sitting in his Notting Hill kitchen staring at printed email threads that his own wife wrote, threads that are now sitting inside 47 boxes of evidence at Louise's legal team's offices. The new plan moves through heritage law. Narrow, technical, built around a 1923 probate clause that Pemberton's replacement, sharp young attorney Kwame Asidu, believes has never been successfully tested against royal private trusts. The argument is clean on paper. Challenge the process, not the person. Frame Elizabeth's final decisions as products of deteriorating judgment. Request a full mental capacity review of documents signed in her final 14 months. It is the most aggressive move Camilla's side has made. It is also the move Louise has been waiting for them to make. Because sitting inside that dark leather portfolio, the one nobody on Camilla's side ever asked about, is a psychiatric evaluation commissioned by Elizabeth herself. Dated, witnessed, legally unassailable. Louise doesn't open it yet. She is waiting for exactly the right moment. For 18 months, Lady Louise Windsor carries that leather portfolio to every single royal function and says absolutely nothing about what is inside it. Crown staff member Amara Asante watches her at 14 separate gatherings across those months. She describes Louise moving through rooms full of people who are actively plotting against her inheritance with the calm focus of someone running a calculation nobody else can see. No raised voice, no leaked frustration, no anonymous briefings to royal correspondents. While Kwame Asidu files motions, Louise files records. She retains the chambers of Darius Mensa, a constitutional law specialist whose firm has served the crown continuously since 1887, and meets with him privately 7 times. Each meeting lasts under 90 minutes. Each meeting ends with a sealed document added to the portfolio. She commissions a complete historical analysis of every private royal estate transfer challenged through heritage law in the last 130 years. Every single challenge failed. She knows why each one failed. She has documented the exact legal pressure points that collapsed each case and mapped Kwame Asidu's current strategy against every one of them. The trap has been built piece by piece across 18 months. And when Louise finally walks into the Crown Estate's private conference room on a gray Tuesday morning and sets that leather portfolio on the table, Darius Mensa watches Kwame Asidu's face go completely still. Because what slides out of that portfolio does not just answer their legal challenge. It ends it permanently. The document has no cover page title. Just a date. Just a name written in Elizabeth's own hand at the top right corner. Darius Mensa places it at the center of the conference table and steps back. He does not explain it. He does not frame it. He simply lets 23 pages of the Queen's handwriting sit in the middle of the room and do what it was always designed to do. Kwame Asiedu reaches for it first. He reads the opening page standing up. By page 3, he has pulled out a chair. By page 7, his legal pad is completely untouched. Whatever arguments he walked into that room carrying, they are dissolving line by line under Elizabeth's precise, unsparing handwriting. The document is not emotional. It is not a grandmother writing about her favorite grandchild. It is a working monarch conducting a forensic assessment of every person positioned to influence royal private assets. Dates, behaviors, documented conversations. Patterns of conduct recorded across 14 months by a woman whose mental clarity Kwame had just publicly questioned in his legal filing. Page 19 stops him completely. For sentences, written in the same steady hand as every other page. No underlines, no emphasis, no dramatic punctuation. Just 4 sentences about Lady Louise that make Kwame Asiedu close the document, straighten his jacket, and look across the table at Darius Mensa with an expression that concedes everything before a single word is spoken. He asks for 30 minutes alone with his client. That meeting lasts 4 minutes. The dismissal order arrives on a Wednesday. No press conference. No public statement. No moment designed for cameras or headlines. One sealed document. Delivered by Royal Courier to Kwame Asiedu's office at 9:17 a.m. Every motion closed. Every challenge dismissed. Every legal pathway Camilla's family had spent 18 months constructing gone. Crown legal advisor Reginald Okafor reads the formal institutional language aloud to a room of senior estate administrators. His voice does not rise. It does not need to. The words carry their own weight. The Balmoral Private Trust transfer stands as executed. Lady Louise Windsor retains full autonomous authority under Clause 47 of the Succession Stabilization Protocol. No further review permitted under any applicable legal framework. Tom and Laura Parker Bowles receive their own notification by separate courier 30 minutes later. Zola Abra, who has spent 18 months managing the strategy from Camilla's side, later describes opening that letter as the moment she understood the full scope of what Louise had actually built. Not just a legal defense, a permanent institutional framework. New Crown protocols now formally distinguish between inherited royal position and earned royal standing. The language is precise. The implications reach every branch of the family. Louise is elevated to senior working royal status within 60 days. And on a late Scottish afternoon, when the Balmoral Hills turn gold under a sky that cannot decide between sun and cloud, Louise walks those 15,000 acres completely alone. No portfolio, no advisors, no agenda, just a 21-year-old woman walking land that a queen spent 2 years making absolutely certain would belong to her. Blood does not choose favorites, but legacy does. And somewhere inside the palace, 3 other inheritance files are sitting on a desk, quietly waiting for decisions that will define the next generation of the royal family. The court of public opinion does not rest easy after a verdict like this one. Because the question Elizabeth embedded inside Project Continuity was never just about Balmoral. It was never just about Louise. It was about what the monarchy becomes when the people inside it stop earning their place and start assuming it. That question does not have a clean answer. Type merit in the comments if you believe Louise earned every acre of that legacy. Type family if you believe blood connection should always come first, no matter what. Every story on this channel exists because power, legacy, and truth are worth understanding. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe right now and turn on your notifications because the next inheritance decision inside that family is already in motion, and the name attached to it will surprise everyone.